Malis didn't know the man studying her from across the Great Hall was the Alpha King. She didn't know he'd refused 7 marriage proposals this year alone, or that he'd come to Thornhaven seeking something far more valuable than a political bride. And she certainly didn't know that the moment their eyes met, he'd already decided she was either his salvation or the most dangerous woman in the kingdom. All she knew was that her feet ached, her hands were raw from scrubbing, and if Lord Harwin caught her standing idle for even a moment, she'd feel his cane across her shoulders again. The feast had been raging for hours. Music swelled from the gallery above, and the scent of roasted venison and honeyed wine hung thick in the air. Malis moved along the edges of the room, refilling goblets, clearing plates, becoming invisible the way she'd perfected over 8 years of service. The corner near the servants' entrance was her sanctuary, dark enough to disappear into, close enough to respond if summoned. She risked a glance at the head table. Lord Harwin sat rigid with anticipation, his gray beard oiled and combed for the occasion. Beside him, his daughter Odessa gleamed like a jewel on display. Her gown was crimson silk embroidered with gold thread, her dark hair arranged in elaborate coils, her smile practiced and perfect. She was beautiful, everyone said so, and she was meant for the king. The Alpha King of Valdrin had arrived at sunset with 30 warriors and no explanation. Lord Harwin had nearly tripped over himself arranging this feast, this presentation, this obvious parade of his eligible daughter. The entire household knew what was expected. Odessa would charm the king would propose. Thornhaven would be bound to the throne. Malis watched the king now, trying to understand the whispers that preceded him. They said he was ruthless, that he'd executed his own uncle for treason, that he trusted no one and smiled even less. They said his mother had been poisoned 6 months ago, and he'd torn his court apart searching for her killer. He didn't look ruthless from here. He looked tired. Lorcan of Valdrin sat at Lord Harwin's right hand, barely touching his wine. His dark hair was cut short, military style, and his jaw was shadowed with stubble like he'd forgotten to shave. He wore no crown, just simple black leather and a sigil ring that caught the firelight. His eyes swept the room continuously, cataloging, assessing. Predator's eyes, Malis thought. The eyes of a man who expected attack from any direction. Those eyes found hers. Malis looked away instantly, heart hammering. Foolish girl, staring at the king. She busied herself straightening goblets on a side table, willing her hands not to shake. Your Majesty, Lord Harwin's voice boomed across the hall. Surely you must agree that Odessa would make a magnificent queen. Her education is impeccable. Her bloodline is ancient. And her beauty? Well? He gestured expansively. See for yourself. Odessa rose and curtsied, the movement graceful and rehearsed. It would be my honor to serve the crown, Your Majesty, in whatever capacity you desire. Malis felt the lie slither across her skin like ice water. She froze. No. Not here. Not now. She clenched her jaw, forcing the sensation down, the gift she'd spent her whole life hiding, the curse that had gotten her mother burned alive, was not going to surface at a royal feast. But the feeling persisted. That cold wrongness that always accompanied deception. Odessa didn't want to marry the king. Odessa was terrified of something. The words she spoke and the truth beneath them were as different as fire and snow. A generous offer, the king said, his voice low and uninflected. But I didn't come to Thornhaven for a bride. Lord Harwin's smile flickered. Surely you came for alliance, Your Majesty. And what stronger alliance than marriage? I came for information. Lorcan rose from his chair and the hall seemed to contract around him. He wasn't the largest man present, but something in the way he moved commanded absolute attention. I've heard rumors, Lord Harwin, rumors that someone in my court has been selling secrets to my enemies. Rumors that the trail leads here. Lord Harwin's face went pale. Your Majesty, I assure you. You assure me. Lorcan walked slowly down the length of the head table, his boots echoing against the stone floor. Everyone assures me. My advisors assured me my mother was safe. My guards assured me no poison could reach her food. My council assures me they're loyal while they sharpen knives behind my back. He stopped at the edge of the dais, scanning the room. I'm tired of assurances. Melis's blood turned to ice. She wasn't looking at him anymore, but she could feel his gaze moving across the hall like a physical weight. I need something else entirely, he said. I need someone who can tell truth from lies. The words hit her like a blow to the chest. Lord Harwin laughed, nervous and too loud. Surely your majesty doesn't believe in such fairy tales. Truth seekers are myths, legends to frighten children. Are they? Lorcan's voice was soft, dangerous. Then why have you been hiding one in your household for 8 years? The hall went silent. Melis stopped breathing. The girl in the corner, Lorcan said without turning around. The one pretending to arrange goblets. Step forward. Every face in the room swiveled toward her. Melis's legs refused to move. This wasn't happening. Couldn't be happening. Now, Lorcan added, a command wrapped in silk. Melis stepped forward on wooden legs. She kept her eyes down, her hands clasped, her entire body screaming to run. She could feel Lord Harwin's fury radiating across the hall, could sense Odessa's sudden sharp interest, and could taste her own fear metallic on her tongue. She stopped 10 feet from the king. Look at me. She raised her eyes. Up close, he was devastating. The tiredness she'd glimpsed from across the room was carved into every line of his face. Exhaustion layered over grief, layered over something that might have been desperation. His eyes were the color of winter storms, gray and fathomless, and they held hers, with an intensity that made her want to look away. She didn't. Your name, he said. Melis, your majesty. Melis? He said it slowly, like he was tasting the syllables. I'm going to tell you 3 things. 2 will be true. 1 will be a lie. You're going to tell me which is which. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Your majesty, I don't... First, my mother's name was Irina. His voice remained flat, uninflected. Second, she died peacefully in her sleep. Third, I intend to find her killer and make him wish he'd never been born. The cold crawled across her skin instantly. Second statement, the ice-water wrongness of falsehood, unmistakable and damning. Melis knew she should lie, should shake her head, play confused, and protect the secret she'd kept since childhood. But the king was watching her with those winter storm eyes, and she could see it there beneath the control. Hope, fragile and desperate, that she might be real. The second one, she whispered. Your mother didn't die peacefully. Something shifted in his expression, just for a moment, just long enough for her to glimpse the grief he carried like shrapnel in his chest. No, he said softly. She didn't. Lord Harwin stepped forward, his face purple with barely suppressed rage. Your majesty, this girl is a servant, a nobody. Whatever trick she just performed is exactly what I've been searching for? Lorcan didn't look at Lord Harwin. His eyes remained fixed on Melis. You have a gift. One I need desperately. Someone in my court murdered my mother, and I can't tell who's lying anymore. Every smile hides a knife. Every loyalty is suspect. He paused. I want you to come to Valdrin. Help me find the killer. In exchange, I'll give you anything you ask. She's not for sale, Lord Harwin sputtered. She belongs to this household. She belongs to no one. Lorcan's voice went cold. Or are you telling me, Lord Harwin, that you keep slaves in your estate? Because slavery was outlawed in my kingdom 40 years ago. Lord Harwin's mouth opened and closed. Melis. The king's attention returned to her, softer now. This is your choice. Not his, not mine. Yours. Choice. The word felt foreign in her mouth. When had anyone ever given her a choice? What happens if I say no? She asked, surprising herself. Then I leave. And you stay here. His jaw tightened. But I think we both know what your life will look like once I'm gone. Once Lord Harwin realizes what you've been hiding under his roof." He was right. She could already feel Lord Harwin's gaze burning into her back. If she stayed, she wouldn't survive the week. "And if I say yes? Then you come with me tonight. You help me find a murderer. And when it's done, you're free to go wherever you wish, with enough gold to never scrub another floor." "How long?" 14 days. No more. 14 days. It felt like a lifetime and nothing at all. "I want your word," Melis said. "A blood oath that you won't harm me or use me against my will." Lord Harwin laughed harshly. "You dare demand a blood oath from the king?" But Lorcan was already drawing a knife from his belt. The blade glinted in the firelight as he drew it across his palm without hesitation. Blood welled up, dark and crimson. "My word," he said, holding out his hand, "sealed in blood. 14 days, your choice, your freedom." Melis took the knife. Her fingers trembled as she cut her own palm, the pain sharp and clarifying. When she pressed her hand to his, something exploded through her. Not cold, not the ice of falsehood. This was heat. Recognition. A connection that snapped into place like a key turning in a lock, resonating through every nerve in her body. Her breath caught, her vision blurred. And beneath her palm, the king's pulse stuttered like he'd felt it too. His eyes widened, storm gray and suddenly vulnerable. "What?" Melis started, but he pulled his hand away, his expression shuddering closed. "We leave within the hour," he said, his voice rough. "Gather your things." He turned and walked toward the door without looking back. Melis stood in the center of the hall, her bleeding palm cradled against her chest, her entire world tilting sideways. She didn't know what had just happened, but she knew, with absolute certainty, that nothing would ever be the same. The journey to Valdrin took 2 days, and Melis spent most of it trying not to stare at the king. Lorcan rode at the front of the column, flanked by 2 warriors who watched the forest with suspicious eyes. He spoke rarely, ate little, and hadn't addressed her directly since they'd left Thornhaven. The blood oath on her palm had scabbed over, but the memory of that strange connection still burned beneath her skin. She rode a gentle mare named Thistle, provided by a stern-faced woman named Corvin who seemed to serve as both the king's captain and his shadow. Corvin had given Melis riding leathers, practical boots, and a look that clearly said, "Don't cause problems." Melis had no intention of causing problems. She had every intention of surviving the next 14 days and disappearing with her gold to somewhere Lord Harwin would never find her. On the second evening, they crested a ridge and Melis inhaled sharply. The castle rose from the cliffs like it had grown there, all dark stone and brutal angles softened by the sunset bleeding across the sky. Towers spiraled upward toward the clouds, and far below, waves crashed against rocks in endless rhythm. It was beautiful the way a blade was beautiful, elegant, deadly, and utterly unforgiving. "Storm Hall," Corvin said, pulling her horse alongside Melis, "home of the Valdrin kings for 600 years. It's..." Melis searched for the right word. "Imposing." Corvin almost smiled. "Wait until you see it in a storm. The lightning hits those towers almost every night in winter. Some say the old kings harnessed it, used it to fuel their power. Is that true? Who knows anymore? The old magic is mostly gone." Corvin's expression flickered. Mostly. They descended the ridge and crossed a bridge so narrow Melis didn't dare look down. Inside the walls, the courtyard bustled with activity. Warriors sparring, servants carrying linens, a blacksmith hammering somewhere out of sight. People stopped to stare as their party passed. Melis felt their gazes like physical pressure, curious and calculating. A woman rushed forward to take the king's reins. Another appeared at Melis's side, helping her dismount on legs that had gone numb from riding. "This way," Corvin said, guiding her toward a side entrance. "His Majesty wants to speak with you before dinner." Malus followed through corridors lit by flickering torches, past tapestries depicting hunts and battles, up spiraling staircases that made her thighs burn. Finally, Corvin stopped at a heavy oak door. He's inside. Remember? He's still the king, even when he doesn't act like it. Before Malus could ask what that meant, the door swung open. The room was a study, lined with books and maps, and the detritus of a man who worked too much and slept too little. Papers covered every surface, candles burned low in their holders, and at the center of the chaos stood Lorcan, his travel-stained leathers exchanged for a simple linen shirt that somehow made him look more human, more vulnerable. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Please." She sat. He poured wine from a carafe on his desk, 2 cups, one of which he set before her. Then he took the seat across from her, close enough that she could see the shadows beneath his eyes. "You must have questions. Several hundred at least." His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Start with the most pressing." Malus wrapped her hands around the wine cup, drawing comfort from its warmth. "How did you know about me? About what I can do?" "Your mother was Verada of Thornwood." It wasn't a question. "A truth-seeker of considerable power. She was executed when you were 7, accused of witchcraft by Lord Harwin's father." The words hit her like stones. "You know about my mother?" "I know about every truth-seeker who's lived in the last century." Lorcan's voice was quiet. "Most are dead. Killed by people who feared them or wanted to use them. Your mother hid you well. Changed your name. Placed you somewhere no one would think to look." He paused. "But 3 months ago, one of my informants heard rumors. A servant girl at Thornhaven who always knew when someone was lying, who'd never once been fooled by a cheating tradesman or a dishonest merchant. And you came to collect me. I came to ask for your help." His eyes held hers. "There's a difference." Malus took a slow sip of wine, tasting for poison out of habit. Nothing. Just warmth and berries and a faint hint of oak. "Tell me about your mother," she said, "the queen who was poisoned." Lorcan was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "She was the only person who truly knew me. My father died when I was 12, leaving me a crown I was too young to carry. My mother carried it with me, advised me, protected me, and told me the truth when everyone else told me what I wanted to hear." He looked away. 6 months ago, she started getting headaches, then fevers. The healer said it was a wasting sickness. Natural. Tragic, but natural. But it wasn't. No. His hand clenched on his wine cup. "After she died, I found traces of ashweed in her medicine. Undetectable unless you're looking for it. Slow acting, the perfect poison for someone who wanted her death to look natural. Who had access to her medicine? That's the problem." Lorcan's laugh was bitter. "Dozens of people. Servants, healers, advisors. Anyone who entered her chambers in the final months could have done it. And since then, I've questioned every one of them. Interrogated, threatened, begged." His voice cracked. "They all swear they're innocent, and I can't tell who's lying." Her chest tightened unexpectedly. Pity. Unwelcome and unfamiliar. "But I can." "Yes." He looked at her again, and the desperation in his eyes made her ache. "Tomorrow, I'm holding council. Every advisor, every healer, every servant who had access to my mother's chambers will be present. I need you to listen, to feel, to tell me which ones carry the stain of lies. And when I find the killer, then I'll deal with them." Something dark moved behind his expression. "Personally." Malus believed him. The cold certainty in his voice left no room for doubt. "There's something else," she said slowly, "at Lord Harwin's estate. When we made the blood oath." She hesitated. "I felt something. Something I've never felt before." Lorcan went very still. "You felt it too," she pressed. "I saw your face. What was it?" For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he exhaled, the sound heavy with exhaustion. I don't know. I've heard of such things. Connections between people, bonds that form instantly and without explanation. But I never believed in them. His eyes found hers. I still don't know what to believe. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He rose, moving to the window, putting distance between them. For now, focus on tomorrow. Find the killer. The rest can wait. She wanted to push, to demand more, but something in the set of his shoulders stopped her. He looked like a man holding himself together through sheer will. One more question, she said. He turned, silhouetted against the dying light. What happens if I find the killer and it's someone you trust, someone you care about? Lorcan's expression hardened into something that made her shiver. Then I'll learn that I never really knew them at all. The council chamber was vast, all vaulted ceilings and banners bearing the wolf sigil of Valdrin. Melis stood in the shadows near the back, dressed in borrowed finery that made her feel like a child playing dress-up. Corvin had positioned her here deliberately, visible but unobtrusive, able to see every face in the room. Just observe, Lorcan had told her that morning. Don't react, don't let them know what you're sensing. We need them comfortable, off guard. Easier said than done. 23 people filled the chamber, advisors in rich robes, healers in simple gray, servants who stood along the walls waiting to be questioned. Melis let her attention drift across them, opening herself to the gift she'd spent so long suppressing. The first hour was torture. Lies everywhere. Small ones, mostly. A steward exaggerating his efficiency. An advisor downplaying a gambling debt. A healer inflating her credentials. The cold prickled across her skin so constantly she felt like she'd been plunged into winter. But none of it was the lie she was looking for. None of it carried the weight of murder. Then Lord Varen spoke. He was an older man, distinguished and silver-haired, with the kind of face that naturally inspired trust. Melis had overheard servants whispering about him that morning. He'd been the Queen's personal advisor for 20 years, a fixture of the court since before Lorcan was born. Your Majesty, Varen said smoothly, I assure you, Queen Irina's death was a tragedy beyond measure. I've devoted months to investigating her final days, and I've found nothing to suggest foul play. Ice cascaded down Melis's spine, not the usual cold. This was deeper, darker, a wrongness so profound it made her stomach turn. Every word Varen spoke was wrapped in deception. She kept her face carefully blank. Thank you, Lord Varen. Lorcan's voice betrayed nothing. Your dedication is noted. The meeting continued. More questions, more answers, more lies, large and small, but Melis barely heard any of it. Lord Varen, the trusted advisor, the man who'd held the grieving king's shoulder at the Queen's funeral. He was lying about everything. That evening, Melis found Lorcan on the eastern ramparts, staring out at the storm-churned sea below. The wind whipped his hair across his face, and he didn't seem to notice. Lord Varen, she said quietly, joining him at the wall. His hands tightened on the stone. You're certain? Everything he said was a lie, not just the investigation. When he talked about your mother, when he expressed grief, when he promised loyalty. She shivered, and not from the cold. I've never felt deception that complete. It was like looking at a mask wearing another mask. Lorcan was silent for a long moment. The waves crashed against the cliffs below, relentless and uncaring. He was my father's closest friend, he said finally. He held me when I was born, taught me to ride, stood beside my mother every day of her illness, bringing her flowers from the garden she loved. I'm sorry. Don't be. His voice was flat. I asked for the truth. You gave it to me. What will you do? I can't arrest him based on your word alone. The council would revolt. Half of them have known Varen longer than they've known me. Lorcan turned to face her. I need more. Evidence. Confession. Something tangible. Melis thought of the way Varen had smiled during the meeting, warm and grandfatherly. The mask so perfect that without her gift, she never would have sensed the rot beneath. "He's careful," she said. "He's been doing this for years. We won't catch him with something obvious. Then we catch him with something unexpected." Lorcan's eyes glinted in the fading light. "You? Me? You're an unknown factor. Varen has no idea what you can do. He saw you standing in the shadows, but he has no reason to suspect the truth." Lorcan stepped closer, his voice dropping. "If we let it slip, that you have information about the Queen's death, something you saw at Thornhaven perhaps, Varen will need to know what you know. You want to use me as bait. I want to give you a choice." He echoed her words from the night before. "I won't force you into danger, but if you're willing, I'm willing." The words came out before she could second-guess them. Lorcan's eyebrows rose. "You didn't let me finish." "I didn't need to." Malus met his gaze squarely. "Your mother was murdered. The man who did it is walking free in your castle, eating your food, pretending to grieve. And you're offering me a chance to help stop him." She paused. "My mother was murdered too, Your Majesty, burned alive because someone feared what she could do. I was 7. I hid in a root cellar and listened to her scream. 16 years, and I still hear it sometimes." His composure fractured. The mask he wore, king, warrior, stone, gave way to the man beneath. "I didn't know," he said softly. "No one does. I don't talk about it." She looked out at the churning sea. "But I remember what it felt like, hiding in the dark, knowing I couldn't help her, knowing that my gift was the reason she died. That wasn't your fault. Maybe not." She turned back to him. "But this is my chance to make it mean something, to use what I am instead of hiding from it. So yes, I'll be your bait." Lorcan was quiet. When he spoke again, his voice came out strained. "You're remarkable. You know that? I'm a servant who scrubbed floors for 8 years. You're a survivor who kept an impossible secret while serving the man whose father killed your mother." His hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "That's not weakness, Malus. That's strength most people can't imagine." Her breath caught. His fingers lingered at her temple, warm against her cold skin. "You should be more careful," she whispered. "Touching me." "Why?" "Because I'll know if you're lying. About anything." His lips curved into something that was almost a smile. "Then ask me something. Test me." Malus's heart pounded. This was dangerous. Not physically, but in some other way she couldn't name. Every instinct screamed at her to step back, protect herself, and maintain the walls she'd built over a lifetime. She didn't move. "When we made the blood oath," she said. "That feeling. Do you know what it means?" Lorcan's smile faded. His hand dropped from her face, but he didn't step away. "I know what the old stories call it. A soul bond. A connection that forms once in a lifetime between two people who were meant to find each other." "And do you believe the old stories?" He was silent for a beat too long. "I didn't," he said finally. "Until I touched your hand and felt my entire world shift sideways. No cold. No wrongness. Just the devastating truth, spoken quietly against the wind." "What happens now?" Malus asked. "Now?" He exhaled. "Now we catch a murderer. And after that? After you've fulfilled your 14 days and you're free to leave." He stopped, seeming to struggle with something. "I won't ask you for anything else. The bond doesn't obligate you to anything. You understand that? You're giving me a choice. Always." The word was fierce. "Whatever this is between us, it means nothing if you don't choose it freely." Something cracked open in Milas's chest. All her life she'd been owned. By circumstance, by debt, by Lord Harwin's petty cruelties. No one had ever offered her freedom without strings. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "Trust someone. Let someone in." "Neither do I." Lorcan's voice was raw. "But I'd like to learn. With you. If you'll let me." Malus looked at him. This king who carried grief like armor and exhaustion like a crown, who'd offered her choices when he could have commanded, who just admitted that he was as lost as she was. She didn't kiss him. It was too soon, the wounds too fresh, the danger too close. But she reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. And when he squeezed back, something that had been frozen inside her for a very long time began to thaw. "Tomorrow," she said. "We set the trap." "Tomorrow," he agreed. They stood together on the ramparts as the stars emerged, two broken people holding on to each other while the storm gathered on the horizon. Neither of them saw the figure watching from the shadows below. Neither noticed when it slipped away to carry word to Lord Varon. The trap was already being sprung, but not by them. The trap was simple. Too simple, Malis thought, but Lorcan insisted that simplicity was their greatest weapon. Varon has survived 20 years at court by outthinking everyone around him, Lorcan explained as they walked through the castle gardens the next morning. To any observer, they appeared to be taking a casual stroll, the king showing his guest the grounds. In reality, they were being watched by at least 4 of Corvin's warriors, hidden among the hedges and statues. He'll be expecting complexity. Layers. Instead, we give him something he can't resist. An easy target. Me. You. Lorcan's jaw tightened. "I hate this plan." "It was your idea." "I know. I still hate it." They stopped beside a fountain where stone wolves eternally chased stone deer through frozen water. Malis tilted her face toward the sun, letting its warmth soak into her skin. After 8 years of Thornhaven's dim kitchens and drafty corridors, she'd almost forgotten what sunlight felt like. "Tell me again," she said. "What exactly am I supposed to do?" "Tonight at dinner, I'll mention that you witnessed something at Thornhaven. Something connected to my mother's death. I won't specify what. Just enough to make Varon nervous." Lorcan's voice dropped low. "If he's guilty, he'll need to know what you saw. He'll come to you. And when he does, I'll be ready." Lorcan turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "You'll have guards nearby. Corvin herself will be watching. But if something goes wrong, it won't." "If it does," he pressed, "you run. You don't fight. You don't hesitate. You run straight to me. Understand?" Milas met his gaze. "You're worried about me." "Of course I'm worried about you." "Why?" She stepped closer, unable to help herself. "I'm just a servant with a useful gift. 14 days from now, I'll be gone. You'll never see me again." Pain flickered across his face, quickly suppressed. "Is that what you think? That you're just useful to me? Isn't it true?" Lorcan was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "My mother used to say that some people come into our lives like storms. They arrive without warning, upend everything we thought we knew. And when they leave, nothing looks the same." His eyes held hers. "You're my storm, Malis, and I don't want you to leave." Her heart stuttered. "Lorcan, I know it's too soon. I know you have no reason to trust me, and every reason to take your gold and disappear the moment our agreement ends." He exhaled. "But I need you to know, whatever happens tonight, whatever happens in the next 14 days, you matter to me, not your gift. You. No cold, no wrongness, just truth, raw and devastating." Malis did something she'd never done in her entire life. She stopped thinking, stopped calculating risks and escape routes and worst-case scenarios. She reached up, cupped his face in her hands, and kissed him. Lorcan went rigid with shock. Then his arms came around her, pulling her close, and he kissed her back like she was air and he'd been drowning. It was nothing like the fumbling kisses she'd experienced in Thornhaven's shadows, stolen moments with stable boys who wanted her body but never her secrets. This was something else entirely. Heat and tenderness and desperation woven together, his hands trembling slightly where they pressed against her back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lorcan rested his forehead against hers. "That was unexpected," he murmured. I'm full of surprises. He laughed, the sound rusty like he'd almost forgotten how. Apparently so. Ask me again, Melis said quietly. After tonight. After Varen is dealt with and your mother has justice. Ask me to stay and I'll give you an answer. What if the answer is no? Then you'll respect my choice. She pulled back to look at him. But what if it's yes? Hope kindled in his storm-gray eyes. Then I'll spend every day proving you made the right decision. She kissed him again, softer this time. A promise, rather than a question. Tonight, she said against his lips. Tonight, he agreed. They walked back to the castle together, his hand warm in hers, and somewhere in the shadows of the garden, Lord Varen's spy memorized every detail to report. The target was confirmed. The girl would be dead by morning. Dinner was an elaborate affair. Melis wore a gown of midnight blue, borrowed again, but finer than anything she'd ever touched, and sat at Lorcan's right hand while the court watched with barely concealed curiosity. Whispers followed her every movement. Who was she? Why had the king brought her from Thornhaven? What was her relationship to the crown? Lord Varen sat 3 seats away, his grandfatherly smile firmly in place. He congratulated Lorcan on his excellent taste in companions. He complimented Melis's gown. He was charming and warm and utterly false, and only Melis could feel the ice crackling beneath his words. Halfway through the meal, Lorcan set down his wine goblet. I've received interesting news from Thornhaven, he announced, his voice carrying across the table. It seems our guest witnessed something during her time in Lord Harwin's household. Something that may shed light on recent tragedies. The room went quiet. Melis felt Varen's attention sharpen like a blade being drawn. Indeed, Your Majesty? Someone asked. Indeed. Lorcan's hand found Melis's beneath the table, squeezing gently. But such matters are best discussed privately. For now, let us enjoy the meal. Conversation resumed, but Melis caught the glance Varen exchanged with a servant near the door. A tiny nod, barely perceptible. The trap was set. Now they waited. The attack came at midnight. Melis was in her chambers, pretending to sleep while Corvin waited in the shadows of an adjoining room. The plan was simple. Varen would send someone to question her. Corvin would intervene, and they'd have proof of his involvement. But Varen hadn't survived 20 years at court by being predictable. The first sign of danger was the smell, sweet and cloying, seeping under her door like invisible fingers. Melis's eyes snapped open as her throat began to close. Smoke. Not ordinary smoke. Something alchemical, designed to incapacitate. She rolled off the bed, staying low where the air was clearer, and crawled toward the adjoining room. Corvin! The captain was already slumped against the wall, unconscious. Melis's heart hammered. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't. The door burst open. 2 figures in dark masks strode through the smoke, moving with military precision. One grabbed her arms while the other pressed a cloth over her nose and mouth. Darkness swallowed her whole. She woke to cold stone against her cheek and chains around her wrists. Melis forced her eyes open, fighting through the fog in her skull. A cellar, somewhere deep underground, judging by the damp and the absolute darkness beyond the single torch burning in a wall sconce. Ah, you're awake. Lord Varen stepped into the light, his grandfatherly mask finally discarded. What remained was cold and calculating, a predator who'd been hiding in plain sight for decades. Where am I? Melis's voice came out raw. Somewhere the king will never find you. Varen pulled up a wooden chair and sat, studying her like a specimen. I must admit, you surprised me. A truth seeker, hidden at Thornhaven all these years. If I'd known what you were, I would have collected you myself long ago. To kill me? To use you? His smile was thin. The same way I intended to use Lorcan's mother. Did you know she was also gifted? Not a truth seeker, but something similar. She could sense intentions, feel the shape of a person's desires. His expression darkened. She started sensing mine. Melis's blood ran cold. She knew you were going to betray him. She suspected. That's why she had to die. Varen leaned forward. Slowly, of course. Carefully. Ashweed takes months to work. And by the time anyone realized it wasn't natural illness, I'd covered every trace. Why? The word tore from her throat. He trusted you. His father trusted you. His father was weak. Varen's voice dripped contempt. He made alliances instead of conquests, chose diplomacy over dominance, and Lorcan is worse. All that power, all that potential, wasted on justice and fairness. He stood, pacing. Valdrin should rule this continent. Instead, we negotiate with lesser kingdoms like equals. It's pathetic. So you killed the queen to destabilize him. I killed the queen because she was going to expose me. Varen's eyes glittered. And now I'm going to kill you for the same reason. But first, you're going to tell me exactly what you told the king. Every detail. Every suspicion. Melis laughed. The sound echoed off the stone walls, sharp and bitter. You think I'll talk? I think you'll scream. Varen drew a knife from his belt. Eventually, everyone does. He stepped toward her. And the wall exploded inward. Stone and dust erupted into the cellar as a figure burst through the gap, moving faster than anything human had a right to move. Varen barely had time to turn before Lorcan slammed into him, sending them both crashing to the floor. The knife skittered across the stones. Varen scrambled for it, but Lorcan was already on his feet, placing himself between the traitor and Melis. How? Varen gasped. The blood oath. Lorcan's voice was ice and fury. Did you think it was just words? I felt her fear from across the castle, felt her pain, followed the bond straight to this pit. He advanced on Varen, every line of his body promising violence. Lorcan, wait. Melis's voice cut through his rage. He confessed. Everything. Your mother, his plans, all of it. But I'm the only witness. If you kill him now. I don't care about witnesses. I do. She met his eyes. I care about justice. Real justice, not just vengeance. Give me that. Please. His fury didn't fade, but it banked, controlled by sheer force of will. Corvin, he called. The captain appeared in the hole he'd made, followed by half a dozen warriors. She looked battered but alert, fury burning in her eyes. Take him, Lorcan ordered. Chain him in the deepest cell we have. Double guards. No visitors. As the warriors dragged Varen away, Lorcan crossed to Melis and broke her chains with his bare hands. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. I thought I'd lost you, he said against her hair. I felt you disappear, and I thought, I'm here. She wrapped her arms around him. I'm safe. I should have protected you better. You found me. She pulled back to look at him. That's what matters. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized she'd shed. I'm never letting you out of my sight again. That might be inconvenient. I don't care. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, and the corner of her mouth. I don't care about convenience. I care about you. Melis closed her eyes, letting herself be held, and for the first time in 8 years, maybe for the first time in her life, she felt truly safe. The trial took place 3 days later in the Great Hall of Stormhall, with every noble and advisor in the kingdom present. Melis stood before them all, her voice steady as she recounted everything Varen had confessed in that cellar. The lies he'd told. The queen he'd murdered. The coup he'd been planning for years. When she finished, the silence was absolute. Then Lord Varen, chained between 2 guards, began to laugh. You believe her? He looked around the hall with contempt. A servant girl from Thornhaven? A truth seeker? He spat the word like a curse. Her kind twist reality, plant false memories, make people see whatever they want them to see. She's deceived the king, and now she's deceiving all of you. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Melis saw doubt flickering on several faces. She has no proof, Varen continued, his voice gaining confidence. No evidence, just her word against mine, and I have served this kingdom loyally for 40 years. He was good. Even knowing the truth, Melis could feel the room wavering, decades of trust battling against her testimony. Then a new voice rang out. I have proof. Every head turned. A woman walked through the parted crowd, her crimson gown marking her instantly. Odessa, Lord Harwin's daughter. Melis went still. Lady Odessa. Lorcan's voice was carefully neutral. This is unexpected. Your Majesty. Odessa curtsied, then straightened with a spine of steel. I've traveled 2 days without rest to be here, because Lord Varen's conspiracy didn't begin 6 months ago. She pulled a leather satchel from her shoulder. It began years ago, with my father. The murmurs became a roar. My father has been selling information to Valdrin's enemies for a decade, Odessa continued, her voice cutting through the noise. Lord Varen was his contact, his handler. I discovered the truth 3 months ago and have been gathering evidence ever since. She held up the satchel. Letters, ledgers, payment records. Everything you need to prove that Varen and my father have been committing treason together. She crossed to Lorcan and placed the satchel in his hands. My father will deny everything, but the evidence doesn't lie. Her eyes met the king's. I know you have no reason to trust me. I know my family name is poison now, but I couldn't let this continue. Not when innocent people, her gaze flickered to Melis, are being hurt. Lorcan opened the satchel, his expression hardened as he reviewed the contents. Lord Varen. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the hall like thunder. Would you like to revise your statement? Varen's composure finally cracked. The girl is lying. Harwin's daughter turning against her own blood. It's obviously a fabrication. These are your seals. Lorcan held up a letter. Your handwriting. Your signature authorizing payment to the Blackshore Raiders for information about our coastal defenses. He let the damning paper fall. Your own words convict you. The hall erupted. Varen lunged against his chains, all pretense of dignity abandoned. You think this changes anything? You think killing me ends the rot? Valdrin is weak. Your father's peace built a kingdom of cowards and diplomats. And you're worse than he was. Lorcan rose from his throne. My father built a kingdom where children don't starve in the streets, where farmers can grow crops without fear of raiders burning their fields, where justice means more than whoever holds the biggest sword. He descended the steps, stopping directly in front of Varen. You call that weakness. I call it civilization. He nodded to the guards. Take him to the cells. His execution will be at dawn. As Varen was dragged away, still screaming, Lorcan turned to Odessa. What you've done took tremendous courage. Your father will be arrested within the week. I know. Odessa's voice was steady, but Melis caught the tremor beneath it. I've made my peace with that. You're welcome to stay at Stormhall, under my protection. Thank you, Your Majesty. Odessa's eyes found Melis. I think I'd like that. That night, Melis found Lorcan on the eastern ramparts again. Their place, she realized. Somehow, without deciding, they'd claim this spot as their own. He stood silhouetted against the stars, his shoulders finally free of the tension he'd carried since she'd met him. It's over, she said, joining him at the wall. It's over. He turned to look at her. Because of you. Because of Odessa. Without her evidence. Without you, I never would have known to look. He took her hands in his. You gave me the truth when everyone else gave me lies. You risked your life to help me find justice. His voice dropped. How do I ever repay that? You already have. Melis squeezed his hands. You gave me a choice when no one else ever did. You saw me, not my gift, not my usefulness. Me. She smiled. That's worth more than gold. Lorcan lifted her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to each palm. The 14 days aren't over yet, he said. You could still leave. I could. Are you going to? Melis looked at him. This king who'd broken through walls to save her, who'd promised her freedom and meant it, who'd kissed her like she was precious and held her like she was home. Ask me, she said softly, properly this time. Something blazed in his eyes. He sank to one knee, still holding her hands. Melis, truth seeker. Storm that upended my entire world. His voice shook slightly. Will you stay? Not for 14 days, not for a year, but for however long you'll have me. Will you be my queen, my partner, my home? No cold, no wrongness, just pure, devastating truth. Yes, she whispered. To all of it. Lorcan rose and kissed her, fierce and tender and full of promise. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't say into the press of her lips. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she heard something unexpected. Applause. She turned to find Corvin, Odessa, and at least a dozen castle staff watching from the doorway, their faces split with grins. Finally, Corvin called. We were taking bets on how long it would take. Lorcan laughed. A real laugh, bright and unguarded, and pulled Melis closer. Come on, he murmured against her hair. Let's go tell them to mind their own business. In a minute. She looked up at him. I want to remember this first. The stars, the sea, the moment everything changed. He kissed her forehead. We'll have thousands more moments. I know. She smiled. But this one's special. This is where I chose you. Lorcan's expression softened, wonder and gratitude shimmering in his gaze. And I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful you did. 2 months passed like water through cupped hands, too fast to hold, too precious to waste. Varen's execution came and went. Melis didn't attend, but she felt something unclench in Lorcan's shoulders when he returned that morning, like a weight he'd been carrying for 6 months had finally been set down. Lord Harwin was arrested a week later. Odessa testified against her own father with a steady voice and dry eyes, and when it was over, she collapsed into Melis's arms and wept for the family she'd never really had. You did the right thing, Melis told her. I know. Odessa wiped her face. That's what makes it hurt. She stayed at Storm Hall, finding purpose in the castle's library, cataloging texts that hadn't been touched in centuries. Melis visited her often, and slowly, improbably, they became friends, 2 women who'd been shaped by cruel fathers and found their own way to something better. Spring arrived with a vengeance, melting the snows and filling the castle gardens with impossible color. Melis walked those paths daily, still marveling at the freedom to go where she pleased, wear what she wanted, and speak her mind without fear. And always, always, Lorcan was there. He courted her properly, just as he'd promised, brought her books from the royal collection, taught her to ride a horse that wasn't borrowed, introduced her to his council as his intended, daring anyone to object with a look that could have frozen fire. No one objected. They're terrified of you, Melis observed after one particularly tense meeting. Good. Lorcan's smile was wolfish. They should be terrified of what I'd do if anyone harmed you. That's not exactly comforting. It's not meant to be comforting. It's meant to be true. She kissed him then, because she could, because he was hers, because every day she woke up amazed that this was her life now. The bonding ceremony took place on the first full moon of summer. Melis had expected something small, quiet. Instead, she found herself standing in the great hall of Storm Hall, the same hall where Lorcan had presented her to his council, where she'd testified against Varen, where her entire world had been remade, surrounded by 500 guests. Breathe, Odessa whispered, adjusting Melis's veil. You look like you're about to faint. I might. You survived Lord Harwin. You survived Varen. You survived being kidnapped and nearly murdered. Odessa squeezed her shoulders. You can survive a wedding. This is different. Yes. Odessa smiled. This is the good part. The music swelled, the doors opened, and Milas walked toward the man waiting at the altar, her heart pounding so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. Lorcan wore formal black, silver thread tracing the wolf sigil across his chest. His hair was tamed for once, his jaw clean-shaven, his storm-gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. When she reached him, he took her hands in his. "You came," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I thought I might wake up." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "I've been afraid this was all a dream." "It's not." She squeezed his hands. "I'm here. I'm real. And I'm choosing you." The ceremony was ancient, conducted in the old tongue that few still spoke. Melis understood perhaps one word in 10, but the meaning was clear. Two souls, two paths, woven together into one. When the officiant called for the blood oath, Melis almost laughed. "Again?" she whispered. Lorcan's lips twitched. Tradition. They cut their palms, the same hands that had sealed their first bargain in Lord Harwin's hall, and pressed them together. The bond that had sparked between them that night flared again, brighter this time, settling into something permanent and unshakable. "I bind myself to you," Lorcan said, his voice carrying through the hall, in storm and stillness, in shadow and light, until the last star falls from the sky. "I bind myself to you," Melis echoed, "in truth and trust, in choice and chance, until my final breath." The officiant pronounced them bonded, and Lorcan kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. The hall erupted in cheers. The celebration lasted until dawn. There was music and dancing, wine flowing freely, toasts that grew increasingly elaborate as the night wore on. Corvin caught Melis's eye at one point and raised her goblet in silent salute. Odessa danced with 3 different lords and looked happier than Melis had ever seen her. But eventually, finally, Lorcan pulled Melis away from the crowd and led her through corridors she now knew by heart. Their chambers, hers and his, merged together like their lives. He closed the door and turned to her, his expression softening into something vulnerable. "Hello, wife." The word sent shivers down her spine. "Hello, husband." He crossed to her slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wanted. She didn't. His hands cupped her face. "I've imagined this moment for weeks, and now that it's here, I don't know where to begin." "Then let me." She kissed him, soft at first, then deeper as his arms came around her. He lifted her easily, carrying her to the bed piled with furs and silks, laying her down like she was made of something precious. "Tell me if you want to stop," he breathed against her throat. "At any point. For any reason." "I won't want to stop." "Tell me anyway." "I promise." He loved her slowly that night, reverently, learning the geography of her skin with hands that trembled slightly, mapping every sigh and shiver, murmuring her name like a prayer. And when they finally came together, Melis felt the bond between them blaze into something transcendent. Not chains, but wings. Afterward, they lay tangled in the moonlight, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Tell me something," she said quietly. "Something I don't know." Lorcan was silent for a moment. "The night I came to Lord Harwin's hall, I almost didn't enter. I stood outside for an hour, convinced I was chasing another dead end, that the truth-seeker rumors were just rumors." His arms tightened around her. "I walked in expecting disappointment, and then I saw you. Standing in the corner." "Standing in the corner?" His voice roughened. "You were watching Odessa lie through her teeth about wanting to marry me, and you had this look on your face, like you could see straight through everyone in that room. Like you were the only real person in a hall full of masks. I was trying to be invisible. You were the only thing I could see." He tilted her chin up. "Your turn. Something I don't know." Melis considered. When Lord Harwin presented Odessa and you walked past her, I thought you were the most arrogant man I'd ever seen, dismissing the beautiful noblewoman to choose the servant girl in the corner. She smiled. I didn't realize you were choosing the person you actually needed. I was choosing the person I wanted. He kissed her forehead. The needing came later. The wanting was immediate. Flatterer. Truth-teller. His smile was soft. I learned from the best. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, the bond humming between them like a second heartbeat. Melis woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of waves crashing far below. For a moment she lay still, savoring the warmth of Lorcan's body against hers, the solid reality of the ring on her finger, the impossible truth that this was her life now. She thought about the girl she'd been 2 months ago, the servant scrubbing floors in Thornhaven, hiding her gift, expecting nothing more than survival. That girl wouldn't recognize her now, wouldn't believe any of this was possible. But it was. All of it. You're thinking loudly, Lorcan murmured, his voice rough with sleep. I'm thinking about corners. Corners? She turned in his arms to face him. I spent my whole life in corners, hiding, watching, making myself small so no one would notice me. She touched his face. You walked into that hall, and everyone expected you to choose the obvious answer, the beautiful daughter, the political alliance, the safe choice. Instead, I chose you. Instead, you saw me. Her throat tightened. You looked past the gown and the bloodline and the expectations, and you saw the girl in the corner, the real one, the one everyone else overlooked. Lorcan's expression softened, stirring something deep in her chest. I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful I did. So will I. She kissed him then, soft and sweet, a promise renewed. Outside, the sun climbed higher over Stormhall. The kingdom stretched beneath them, peaceful and whole. Somewhere in the castle, Odessa was probably already in the library. Corvin was drilling the guards. Life was continuing, ordinary and extraordinary all at once. And in the royal chambers, a king held his queen close and thanked every star in the sky that he'd walked past the obvious choice and found something infinitely more precious. The girl in the corner, the storm that changed everything, his home. Where are you reading from? I'd love to meet you in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people discover these tales.